Hello and welcome again to Not Fake News. Don't forget to share, subscribe, and smash that like button. We got Tucker Carlson. So, let's do this.
Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. Attorney General Jeff Sessions is scheduled to testify tomorrow before the Senate Intelligence Committee. The subject, needless to say, is Russia. That's pretty much the only thing Washington can talk about or respond to at the moment. Sessions may strike you as an unlikely Putin conspirator, having spent virtually all of his 70 years living in or representing Alabama. That's an awfully long way from Moscow in every sense. Doesn't matter. Everyone affiliated with the administration is a potential suspect these days. Sessions says that as a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, he talked on 2 separate occasions with the Russian ambassador to the United States. And that's it. That's the total known extent of his contact with the Russian government. But it's enough. According to top Democrats, Sessions must resign immediately.
On March 2nd, I said Attorney General Sessions should not be in that job and he should resign. So that's, 3 months ago, more than 3 months ago. So that's my position on him.
I don't even know why he is still Attorney General. He lied before Congress in order to get confirmed. That's a perjury charge. He also lied on his security clearance forms about his Russian meetings. Those are false official statements. He should have resigned months ago.
For the good of the country, Attorney General Sessions should resign.
We've been covering the Russia story most nights on the show for the past 7 months, and over that time we've noticed a theme. Almost all the claims you hear about Russia are general rather than specific. Russia hacked our election. We hear that line almost every day. Okay, we're open-minded. How exactly did Russia hack our election? Well, comes the answer, they just did. All 17 intelligence agencies say they did. Russia undermined our democracy. Okay, but can you be more specific? It's a pretty serious charge, and it might be nice to have some details. They can't provide those details, or they won't. And if you keep pressing for details, they'll attack you personally, as we found out when Adam Schiff, the ranking Democrat on the House Intel Committee, accused me of, quote, carrying water for Putin when I asked him to back up his claims. Character assassination is always easier than making a sensible argument. Which brings us back to Jeff Sessions and Russia. Those 2 meetings with the Russian ambassador, Sergei Kislyak, those have changed the course of recent history, no exaggeration. Sessions was forced to recuse himself from a major Justice Department investigation into Russia and then fend off insinuations that he somehow committed treason because of those meetings. So what were the meetings about? What were they like? Well, since nobody accusing Sessions of wrongdoing seems to know or care, we decided to find out ourselves. So over the weekend, we tracked down an eyewitness to one of those meetings. It took place at the Republican National Convention in Cleveland the first week of July last summer. It was an event called Global Partners in Democracy. It turned out to be a not very scintillating gathering that's staged every 4 years and has been for decades on behalf of scores of foreign diplomats who want to see how American politics works. So Sessions gave a speech, and as he left the stage, about 15 ambassadors walked up to say hi to him. Kislyak was among them. That was the total extent of the meeting right there. Sessions and Kislyak never broke away from the group to talk privately. They never exchanged cash or microfilm or secret messages. We know this from the person we talked to, who was just a few feet away when it happened, but also because that room was filled with more than 100 other witnesses. That includes agents from American diplomatic security in Washington and a number of Obama political appointees from the State Department. They're all standing around as this secret meeting took place. It was a total nothing burger, quote, says the person who saw it, who, by the way, has never worked for Sessions, doesn't even really know him. Quote, I was shocked by how it has been distorted. Well, if you're shocked, you haven't been paying attention. This kind of thing is happening all over Washington right now. Guilt by association, attack by innuendo, classic witch hunt stuff. You ought to be worried about it, too, because if Jeff Sessions can be denounced as a Russian spy, anyone can be. Dr. Wendy Osifo is a political commentator who thinks Sessions must resign, and she joins us tonight. Wendy, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you.
So, I mean, I would think, as a progressive, you would believe in hearing evidence before reaching conclusions in due process. He hasn't even testified yet. These meetings amount to nothing, and you think he should resign on the basis of them.
Absolutely, I think he should resign. So let's start on the basis that Jeff Sessions should not even be an attorney general. This is the same man that called the NAACP and the ACLU un-American, the same man who Coretta Scott King said this man should not be anywhere near our government, and his judgeship was rejected. Sessions should definitely resign. He has no business in our government.
Because he disagrees with you. Now, let me just say, I think the NAACP is a shadow of itself. I think it's a joke. It's an appalling
Tucker.
joke. So does that make me a bad person? No, it makes me someone who disagrees with you on that subject.
It makes you someone who disagrees with me on that subject. However, the difference between you and Jeff Sessions is you are not the Attorney General. As an Attorney General, you should have a certain decorum when it comes to civil liberties, and he does
So
not.
anybody who criticizes NAACP or the ACLU should not be allowed to be Attorney General of the United States. That's what you're saying?
I think your judgeship should be rejected as it was for Jeff Sessions. Moreover, with Jeff Sessions, when we look at...
So only people who agree with the political aims of the ACLU and the
No,
NAACP. So
no,
basically,
no.
no one who's right of left should be allowed to govern in the country.
No.
That kind of is the view, I've noticed.
No, that's not necessarily the view. The view is that anyone who is in our government should welcome all thoughts, should welcome all streams of thinking, and Jeff Sessions does not. And that is a
Sounds
problem.
like you're the one who doesn't. I mean, he disagrees with you on this subject.
Okay.
And so he shouldn't be allowed to hold high government office. That appears to be the case you're making. That's just, is that a constitutional position that you have?
Well, the constitutional position I have is that he lied on the SF-86, the foreman, which made him the Attorney General.
And he lied because he was asked, did you, in the Congress, by the senator from Minnesota, did you, in your capacity as a Trump surrogate, meet with the Russians? And his position is, no, in my capacity as a senator from Alabama, an Armed Services Committee member, I met on 2 occasions in a meaningless way with Kislyak.
Oh, Tucker, come on. You know that that's not the way in which the form is written. Furthermore, the form says you have to be honest and you have to be completely forthcoming with information. He did
How much
neither.
do you know about this? I mean, that meeting with Kislyak was on his public schedule.
How about the third meeting that we're hearing about?
Was on his public schedule.
How about the third meeting that we're hearing about that he has not made mention of?
Well, they're denying it took place. Do you have evidence that it took place?
Do you have evidence that it didn't take place?
I don't know. I mean, we've had no eyewitnesses. We've had no one allege that it took place in any specific way. And Sessions himself and his staff say it didn't take place. So I guess
we
until...
have James Comey, the former director of the Federal
Comey say it took
Bureau
place?
of Investigation. In the closed session, it came out because we all know leaks are synonymous with Washington, D.C., even if it's a closed session.
So Comey said, where did it take place and when?
Well, Tucker, hello. They said that the third meeting happened. Now, Comey did not
Where?
provide details. He did not provide details. I was not there, so I don't know if he
But
did.
it's something you heard on television, therefore he should resign because of that. Because why? I mean, do you see the crazy? I don't want to be mean to you, but I mean,
No, you're not being
do you
mean.
see that if before you destroy someone's life and force him out of his job and impute his character, wouldn't you want some evidence before you do that? But
You mean
no.
the same way that Jeff Sessions was calling for Hillary Clinton for us to disband her? Like, he was destroying her character as well.
Therefore, he deserves it now? Is that what you're arguing?
No, I'm not arguing
What
that.
are you arguing exactly?
What I'm arguing exactly is that he was dishonest on his form. What I'm arguing exactly is that he has no place being an attorney general
Because
to
he
begin with.
doesn't-
What I'm
because he
arguing
doesn't like
exactly...
NAACP and he had some secret meeting about
absolutely
wishing
not.
nothing.
Absolutely not. What I'm arguing exactly is that this is another tile in the mosaic of dishonesty that is the Trump administration. And we have to look at it in totality. And that is a problem.
So you don't like
It's
the administration?
totality.
Anyone who works there should resign because they're tainted by the dishonesty? I mean, look, I guess here's
No.
the point I'm making, okay? I think Sessions is worth defending as a man because I think he's an honorable man, and I happen to agree with a lot of his ideas.
He's honorable. He called a black attorney a
But
boy.
even if
He's
actually
honorable.
he denies that he said that.
Okay, so if I deny it says something that makes it the
Well, I
truth.
don't know. It's not proved. And I guess
Okay.
this is the point.
It
we're
may
defending.
be.
And it is that you ought to be required to prove something before you punish someone for something. If we held a criminal trial using the standards you're outlining here, there'd be a lot of injustice, don't you think? We don't punish people unless we can prove they did something wrong, and you can't.
Well, at the same token, the President of the United States, who lives at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, has made a lot of assassination of character on people, but we have not said to him, not only do you have to apologize, you have to be held accountable. Did he not say that President Obama wiretapped where he
I
lived?
think we're arguing different things here. I'm not here to defend the president's Twitter feed. I'm merely
Was it not proved? But everything that Trump accused people of turned out to be true. Obama did surveillance on him. It ended up being true.
saying that the
Okay.
Attorney General of the United States shouldn't be forced out of office unless we can prove he did something wrong. And in the case, for example, of the third meeting with the Russians,
Okay. As if two wasn't
it's
enough.
insane.
As if two
Do
wasn't
you think
enough.
it's disqualifying if someone coming down off a riser is...
Having meetings with Russian ambassadors is a normal, everyday life in a politician's life. So 1, 2, 10,000 doesn't matter.
Greeted by a foreign ambassador. Does that disqualify you for high office?
Are you saying that that's what he did? Do you know the extent of his meetings?
Yes, as you saw that one meeting. I mean, I actually interviewed someone this weekend who was standing right next to him, who's not particularly a Sessions guy, just happened to be there, and I take his word for it. By the way, there are a ton of other people in the room, like 100 of them,
Okay.
and no one alleged otherwise. I'm just saying, shouldn't we have a higher standard before we try to destroy people, or no?
I don't think it's destroying him. I don't
Forcing him to resign.
That is not destroying him. He's already.
How would you feel? You teach at Johns Hopkins.
Yes,
if
I
I
do.
said I've heard that Wendy may have, I don't know any details about this at all, but may have met with some representative of a foreign government I dislike, and I'm going to go to her employer and say she needs to be fired right now. How would you feel about that?
I would feel okay because I know at the end of the day I can go. I can go before the world and say, actually, I did not. And we will see tomorrow that Jeff Sessions is not going to do that. Instead, he's going to say, you know what, I will enact executive privilege on this and I will not answer these questions. And that's what we're going to see. And we're going to see him play the blame game and say, I lied on this form because I didn't know I should put on the form.
The blame game.
That's what's going to happen.
So I do think there is a higher principle here, but you clearly disagree. Wendy, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, by now, former CBS Evening News host Dan Rather really ought to know better than to push dubious political news angles for political gain. He lost his job doing that several years ago. Nevertheless, last Friday, he went on another cable channel to compare the events of last fall's election to the war against Japan somehow. Watch.
The Russians pulled off what I call a psychological Pearl Harbor, a surprise attack that was devastating to the confidence of our whole system of elections and therefore our whole system of government. It's one of the great psychological warfare victories.
Well, Pearl Harbor, of course, got us into World War II. Is it time for World War III? Because, remember, Russia hacked our democracy. Charles Krauthammer is a writer and columnist and keen observer of the insanity now unfolding. Charles, when you look at Russia hacking our democracy, does Pearl Harbor come to mind?
I think that's a deranged analogy. I mean, it's like saying this is the worst scandal since Teapot Dome, but Watergate is insignificant compared to it. Look, so far, and Lordy, I am not a Trump apologist. So far,
That's true. I can vouch for that.
Did he just say, "Oh Lordy"?
I've been to adopt it from my own. I mean, so far, it starts with the charge the Russians have interfered in our election. In the Comey hearing, people got all incredibly sanctimonious about that. Comey said it's not a Republican issue, it's not a Democrat, it's an American issue, it's a threat to our democracy. Yes, they leaked some documents, we think the evidence is. The idea that they actually tampered with the system. The Russians have been doing this to just about every election and every country that we know. It's just a little more obvious this time. But imagine that this had happened in 2012, and it was Mitt Romney, the man who said Russia is our biggest enemy, was at the receiving end of Russian hacking, and that the accusation was it re-elected Barack Obama. Do you think the Democrats on that committee would be in high dudgeon over this attack on American democracy? This is the purest hypocrisy. But let's ignore that and say, okay, you want to investigate that. But that's not what the Democrats are interested in. It's the collusion argument. That's sort of the sidebar to this, supposedly the sidebar. There's no evidence up until now, and they've been looking since July, of Trump collusion in this affair. So on the second count, there's no evidence of this. So now they're going after the post facto stuff, what Trump did afterwards. People know they're not going to get him on collusion, at least not on the evidence that we have. The head of the FBI tells him 3 times you aren't the target, meaning you're, in our eyes, innocent of this. So now it's going to be on obstruction, where, as Professor Alan Dershowitz said, how can a president be obstructing justice, assuming on the Flynn case, when he has the constitutional authority to dismiss the case or to order its dismissal instantly? So if he's allowed, I say it's improper, he shouldn't have done it. But they did it's obstruction of justice when he has the authority to dismiss it completely is simply absurd.
Well, it's insane. And here's the one thing from the Comey testimony that struck me was at the end about Jeff Sessions. He said, there are probably a lot of reasons he would have needed to recuse himself. I can't tell you what they are.
That's innuendo. That's exactly
It is the lowest form of character assassination. And then it turns out, according to the leaks, in this meeting, he didn't have the goods. He had no idea. He may have met with him a third time at some undisclosed place, the Mayflower Hotel. I mean, it was only designed to hurt Jeff Sessions. An FBI director should not act that way.
Comey, I think Trump had a really bad day on the day of the coup. I think Trump had a really bad day on the day of the Comey testimony. I think Comey had a really bad day as well. The idea that he was sort of sainted by the Democrats was sort of shocking and revolting. There's a guy who admitted to being cowardly in the face of instructions from Loretta Lynch, to being cowardly when supposedly he was being improperly influenced by the president, by not going to the authorities if he thought there was obstruction going on, instead putting it in a memo, sticking it in a box, and holding it as protection. These are not very honorable things to do. So I thought he came out diminished as well. But now, so that we are now on like the third branch of this attempt to bring down Trump. The collusion, which is not there, the obstruction, which is not there. So now they're going to go after Sessions on what? What's the charge?
It's not even clear that he brushed shoulders with someone whose job it is to meet U.S. Senator. I mean, it's a witch hunt at this point, in my view. Charles, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Are you a sad progressive who dreams about President Trump being knifed to death? Well, you're in luck. A new production of Julius Caesar in New York will let you live out your fantasy, and at least one person at CNN thinks that's great. We've got details. Also, the campus left keeps rioting in order to suppress dissenting thought. Some lawmakers have decided they're going to protect the First Amendment. We'll talk to someone who says efforts to protect free speech are wrong. Next.
It is hard, and there's a level of viciousness that I was not expecting. I was not expecting the intensity of this experience, but this isn't supposed to be easy. Mm-hmm. My father and this administration intends to be transformative, and we want to do big, bold things, and we're looking to change the status quo. So I didn't expect it to be easy.
That was Ivanka Trump discussing the political climate since last fall's election. The viciousness does seem to be increasing. A New York production of Shakespeare's play Julius Caesar features a Caesar modeled on President Trump. Spoiler alert, he does get stabbed to death halfway through the play, as he has for hundreds of years. That play was sponsored by Time Warner. That's the parent company of CNN. Frieda Zakaria, who hosts a show on CNN on the weekends, tweeted this: "If you're in New York, go see Julius Caesar free in Central Park, brilliantly interpreted for the Trump era. A masterpiece." He laughed, he cried. Well, fantasies about the violent death of the president seem to be a running theme at CNN these days. Just 2 weeks ago, Kathy Griffin, a CNN host at the time, she did the New Year's show, fantasized about beheading President Trump. What is going on over there? Joe Concha writes about media for The Hill, and he joins us tonight. So, Joe, is it wrong to connect the dots and see that this is a theme now?
Oh, it's absolutely a theme, Tucker, because when you think about it, Time Warner obviously owns CNN, as you just mentioned. They had the Kathy Griffin situation just 2 weeks ago. They're forced to let her go.
CNN is seriously
triggered. They also own HBO, Tucker. And Bill Maher, just 10 days ago, on that program, interviewing a Republican senator, said that he was a House N-word, and he had to apologize. HBO didn't suspend him. I don't quite know why, probably because there's no advertisers on HBO, so there was no threat of boycott. HBO also in 2012 featured a severed head on Game of Thrones of President Bush. Then you go to Reza Islan, who called the president a POS on Twitter. He said a lot worse on there. And CNN releases a statement saying that he's not an employee of the network, even though he hosts the show. So a week later, they were forced to fire their non-employee, and he's gone. So now Time Warner here, Tucker, has an opportunity to say we don't agree with any production that assassinates any president. Trump, Obama, Bush, it doesn't matter. And instead, they appear to be sticking by it, like the New York Times, who also sponsors Julius Caesar and Shakespeare in the Park in Central Park. You know what CNN and the New York Times have in common, Tucker? Harvard study about 2 weeks ago shows that CNN is number one in terms of negative coverage of Trump, 93% negative. New York Times is number 3, 87% 12% negative. So it shows me that they not only disagree with the president in terms of ideology and policy, but there is an actual vitriol and hatred there that then leads to them sponsoring events like a Julius Caesar and a Donald Trump getting stabbed to death by women and minorities.
But why don't you say so? I mean, there's another cable channel that's pretty openly left. It's, the Leon Trotsky channel, and if you're into that, you can watch it. And I think they're pretty straightforward about who they are. And speaking for myself, I'm not bothered by it because I don't feel misled.
Right.
But if you have a channel that is always lecturing you about the primacy of news is a star about the news, and then they're pushing an uncloaked political agenda, there's something grating about that. Have they thought about just being who they are?
No, CNN continues to insist that they are a nonpartisan network, that Fox is over here and MSNBC is over here, and they're here to give you the middle. And just the numbers just don't work out that way, Tucker. And if you remember a couple of years ago, there was a clown that in Missouri that wore a mask at President Obama. This is in 2013, I think. And
at a rodeo.
CNN was all...
At a rodeo. He was just a rodeo clown.
Over this story. A lot of media was all over it, to the point where not only does the clown get fired, and this clown wore masks of Reagan and Bush and Clinton in previous years. He was a veteran clown, apparently. But he was banned for life from the Missouri State Fair because of the media coverage, and it was so horrible that a clown wore a mask of a president when he's worn masks of other presidents before. It's crazy.
Well, I do remember 8 years of getting a lot of lectures
ridiculous.
about, impugning the dignity of the office and belittling the guy and all this stuff, and you have to, even if you disagree, treat him with respect. It's kind of fine with me, actually. I'm happy to treat the president with respect. He's the president. But whatever happened to that standard? It seems to have changed.
I think we should all put on masks of Obama.
It has, and it's had, even in the late night sphere as well, Tucker. Remember Stephen Colbert just a couple of weeks ago making a sexual joke about Putin and Trump. Bill Maher, I'll mention him again, and Bill's very straightforward about who he is, and I respect that. I think he makes a lot of good points. But he basically described Ivanka Trump performing a sex act on her father. So the bar just keeps getting lower and lower, and I think Kathy Griffin probably saw what those guys were doing and said, oh, I could hold up a beheaded head of Trump because everybody's getting away with these.
And then the Caesar in the Park, that also. They saw Kathy Griffin and said, well, if she could do that, I could do that. But I just don't think they're seeing the negative part of it, which is getting fired, losing funding. Then they're not thinking about that. Maybe Caesar in the Park was losing money over the last few years and thought that this would be a way to get people to come. Or maybe it was just something that they just couldn't resist. And they've been planning.
And nobody really seems to be objecting to it. So that's where we are now, Tucker. Just the bar is so low. And one more final point. Time Warner and AT&T are trying to complete a merger. That's nowhere near done. And the president did say on the campaign trail that he may try to block that. Matters like this certainly don't help.
You just sort of wonder what's going to happen when all this is over. When, Trump is gone and there's a new president. Is anyone going to watch that channel? Will anyone believe them again? I mean, Joe, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Evergreen College in Olympia, Washington has become so unruly that some professors are simply fleeing the campus. Up next, we'll talk to Professor Brett Weinstein, whose defiance in the face of the mob.
Wow. Boy, oh
Professor
boy.
Brett Weinstein, whose defiance in the face of the mob started it all. Plus, a high school football coach was fired after praying silently with his players. Now he's suing the school for his job back. He joins us next. Time now for campus craziness, and in that category, no school comes close to matching Evergreen College in Washington State. We've been in a coma for the last month. Here are the basics. Student activists sought to kick all white people off campus for an entire day. Brett Weinstein, who's a biology professor there and a self-described progressive, refused to leave. He said that was wrong. He was subsequently harassed by a mob howling for his job. Instead of sticking up for their colleague, meanwhile, dozens of Evergreen professors have called for Weinstein to leave, calling him the villain, demanding he be investigated. Professor Weinstein has relocated his family for their safety, but he joins us now, and we're grateful he has. Professor, thanks for coming on. So,
thanks for inviting me back, Tucker.
You're no longer on the campus of Evergreen. Why?
Well, the college has never acknowledged the danger that they put us in, and therefore I have no way of knowing whether it's safe for me to return. Their assurances that it is safe don't mean anything. Not that they've offered them.
Not that they've offered them. No, it seems to me, and you and I have talked before, I doubt we share the same politics at all, but this seems a pretty cut and dried case of the defense of free expression. You had a point of view, and your right to have that ought to be sacrosanct. And I wonder, you know, how many of your colleagues or others in academia have supported you in that?
Well, I've received tremendous support outside of the college, and I've received quite a bit of support privately within the college, but publicly, only one other professor has come forward to say he supports my position.
And what is your position, if you could sum it up for us?
Well, the issue is complicated. Let me start by just simply pointing out the protest of my class occurred because I sent an email to the staff and faculty email list protesting what we call day of absence. In this case, day of absence was being reversed by the organizing committee, and white people were asked to leave the campus. It was not that we were forced to leave, but we were asked to leave, and it was made very clear that leaving was an act of allyship with people of color, and therefore not leaving if you were white meant that you were not an ally.
And you refused to leave?
I did refuse to leave, and I sent a letter. I think it was very carefully stated, but it said that there was a tremendous difference between a population absenting themselves from a shared space and a population deciding to absent other people from that same space. And that on a college campus, people should be equally free to be on campus irrespective of their skin color.
Exactly. Amen. Which I thought was sort of a basic precept of American life. Do you plan to go back to Evergreen?
Well, I certainly have duties to finish this year, and I have no alternative employment, so my expectation is that I will have to go back. That said, it's not exactly clear how I can go back to a campus where the administration...
See, here's the deal. If he was the opposite, if he was a left-leaning professor that was being bullied in the school, they would, and for some reason got fired or had this situation where he couldn't go back and felt funny. Besides the fact that they would all protest, he would have 10 job offers. Why? Because a left-leaning professor is a sneaky type, that Democratic type, trying to, you know, brainwash the kids. They're wanted. An evil, messed up person is wanted by the Democrats. They suck them up. They put them on CNN. They put them here. They put them there in government. They use them. So if he was the opposite, see, he's a good person. You could tell. If he was a bad person, he'd have 4 job offers after this episode ran. But no, he has to go back to the place where they're bullying him and trying to take away his free speech because he has no other way of making money. Somebody should make a GoFundMe account for this guy.
Administration and the faculty have invested so heavily in demonizing me. At first they demonized me as a racist, and as it became clear that that was not resonating with people, they shifted their critique, and in fact have blamed my last appearance on your program for everything that has occurred at Evergreen since. So I don't know how I can go back and teach, given that I have been portrayed as the reason that Evergreen is in crisis.
It's just grotesque. And for the record, of course, all of this happened before you came on our show. We asked you on because we saw it unfolding.
That's right.
I really hope a college, any college, who wants a professor or principal will call you right after this appearance tonight. Professor, thanks for coming on.
Thanks very much.
Well, Evergreen is just the most recent and the most obviously egregious case of the left trying to enforce absolute ideological conformity on campus. Now, some lawmakers are taking affirmative steps to protect the First Amendment. In 10 states, bills have been introduced or passed to protect freedom of speech on campus or to punish students who attempt to suppress the right of others to speak freely. It seems relatively non-controversial. Scott Ross, though, was the director of One Wisconsin Now. He opposes these laws, and he joins us. Scott, I don't know if you saw the interview we just did, but it was with a self-described progressive on the campus of Evergreen who has been physically threatened because he has a different view. And this kind of thing is happening on a bunch of campuses, and I would think that sincere liberals would be upset about it and would be trying to fix it, but they're not. Why?
Well, Tucker, first of all, thank you for having me. And there is nobody who should defend violence or threats or disorderly conduct, but I don't think that the bill we're seeing, particularly here in the state of Wisconsin, meets any of those thresholds. What's happening is we have a coordinated effort to try and suppress free speech by government on University of Wisconsin campuses to intimidate students, faculty, and administrators from discussing critically important issues facing the public policy debate.
I don't know.
Okay. Government-supported agenda to stop free speech. That's what it is. That's what's going on.
Well, who writes your talking points? I mean, do you live in this country? Are you watching what's happening on college campuses? I mean, a lot of them, not just Evergreen and Berkeley, but lots of campuses where people stand up and they're like, I disagree, and they're shouted down and people threaten them. That's a real thing. That's not a creation of this show or Fox News or the right. I mean, that's totally real. Why aren't you upset about it?
Well, what I think is this, is that we have in the legislation here in the state of Wisconsin a potential solution that is infinitely worse than the alleged problem. You have the hand of government coming in trying to intimidate people from speaking out on campus. Now listen, our college campuses have multiple jurisdictions of law enforcement. Here in Wisconsin, you've got Capitol Police, you've got City Police, you've got Campus Police. If somebody crosses the line into disorderly conduct, they can be prosecuted and detained by trained law enforcement officials. This bill is not that. This bill is providing some sort of safe space where people can't have an honest and frank debate about
they can't have them now in case after case. And again, I know that, people try to dismiss this as something, that demagogues are ginning up to get right-wingers.
Depression is a tangle of multiple symptoms.
This is something, that demagogues are ginning up to get right-wingers exercised, but that is demonstrably not true. We do this every week. It's totally real. People who can't speak on campus because they have a divergent view from the majority, and I thought the whole point of being liberal was to defend people like that. Where have you been when this is going on? What have you done to defend free speech?
Tucker, I have stood with conservatives and Republicans in fighting for free speech rights here in the state of Wisconsin. That is a certainty. But what I would say is this regarding this particular piece of legislation, and I can only speak for Wisconsin, where not one single conservative speaker who has come on campus has been prevented from being able to deliver their remarks in full. And so I think that's the thing that we have to remember here, is that once you create that chilling environment where people are afraid to speak out, that's where you don't have the opportunity to listen to each other,
it's almost like you're kidding. Do you have kids in school? Because I got 4 of them. You talk to any of them or their friends or anybody who's in college right now, and they're like, look, I don't want to give my opinion because I'm going to be penalized. Anyone who's not in a very specific narrow band of progressive thought is hurt. That's totally, are you not aware of this?
I think that threatening anybody with violence or intimidating them is a terrible thing that should be prosecuted. What I don't like is the government, big government, coming in and writing laws that tell people they can and cannot speak on campus, and that is what this legislation is here in the state of Wisconsin.
This is already government. What do you think UC Berkeley is? What do you think Madison is? These are government schools, and the government is doing literally nothing to protect the rights of the minority. And again, this ought to be something that you're like waking up mad about every day. Where are liberals? Are there any left?
The University of Wisconsin is protecting free speech rights. Every speaker who's come to a University of Wisconsin campus, even provocateurs who have things to say that I would definitely disagree with, have been able to deliver all their remarks, Tucker. It hasn't happened here. That's the problem.
Do you believe that a student in a poli-sci class at the University of Wisconsin-Madison could say to his professor, I'm for Donald Trump, and expect that his grade would not be affected by that? Honestly, look at me right in the face and say, yeah, no problem.
Absolutely, that's ridiculous. But what I will say is this.
You're
we
saying
got the records for the creation of this bill here in the state of Wisconsin. And what we found was that they had originally wanted the Republican Attorney General to be involved in the prosecution and oversight of this, and he flat out refused, and they had to take him off the bill.
I don't care what your Republican Attorney General
thinks this is a step over the line.
I don't care.
Then the legislators should think the same
Some Republican
thing.
disagrees with me. That means nothing to me. Where are the elected officials saying we're taking an absolutist position on the First Amendment? You should not have your rights abridged as enumerated in the Bill of Rights. The first one is a right to say what you think is true. Where are the politicians standing up for that? I don't see any on the left. Do you?
I would have to disagree with you strongly on that, Tucker, because,
by allowing people to have that expression, the government isn't getting in the way of free speech. I mean, once the government comes in and tells you or I what we can and cannot say, that's where we cross the line into oppressing the First Amendment.
But that's
Only
happening.
government can
That's
stop the First
happening.
Amendment.
That's happening right now. I mean, that's happening. If Milo Yiannopoulos can't give a speech at UC Berkeley, a government school, then the government is complicit in his First Amendment rights being taken away, no?
Well, I would agree that you've given me a handful of examples that have happened around the nation.
I've got like
where
a huge. I mean, I
yes.
can bore you. My viewers are very familiar with them. We talk about it all the time because we're not a liberal show because we believe in the First Amendment.
I can't speak to that. I can tell you what goes on in the state of Wisconsin, which is we are allowed to speak on campuses. The Republicans want to stop that. And, you know, again, the Attorney General opposes the idea.
The Republicans want to stop that.
One of the Republican state representatives was on public radio, was asked about the constitutionality of it, and he said he agreed that there were constitutional problems with this particular piece of
someone's got to
legislation.
stand up
That's
for
why we're
speech
trying
and
to
no
stop
one
it
on
here
the
in the
left
state of Wisconsin. We do hope some of the Republicans will join us in this and stop it from happening.
Thanks for joining us.
That guy is an American traitor. He's a traitor to the American people. Remember that face. I'll be saying that a lot on my show, pointing out people who you need to remember. It's usually anyone on the left. Remember this guy, American traitor. You might see him one day running for office somewhere. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to share, subscribe, and smash that like button. But here's the thing. When you click subscribe, now you have to hit the bell next to the subscription button also. Don't forget that. It's important. When you click subscribe, hit the bell. And if you like that video, then you will definitely love the one we picked out just for you guys. Right where those arrows are pointing. Click it, and I'll see you in a moment. Thanks for watching Not Big News.